So you are here for the International Alumni Panel, Finding Career Success in the US. My name is Addie Chung. I'm the Associate Director of International Student Career Engagement at the USC Career Center, and I will hand it off to my lovely co-host today, Ivy. You want to start?
Hi guys, my name is Ivy and I'm the grad intern in Career Center right now. Also, I'm the master's student in educational counseling program in USC right now. Thank you.
And do we have Sharon? Yep.
Hi, my name is Sharon, and I'm the co-chair of professional affairs for the International Student Assembly, and I'm currently a junior studying business and cognitive science.
Yeah, so Sharon is from the International Student Assembly, and as is Lucas, and we're collaborating on this workshop, this panel together. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our panelists. So first we have, I think Ivy, you're introducing Katya.
So Katya is originally from Jakarta, Indonesia, and raised in Singapore. And she's the executive assistant to the CEO and social media coordinator at Invisible Universe, an internet-first, AI-powered animation studio focused on incubating the next generation of iconic IP franchise on social media. In addition to her administrative responsibilities, Katya plays a key role in shaping the company's creative strategy and execution, actively contributing to the development of Invisible Universe, animated franchises, marketing initiatives, and community management. Katya graduated from USC in May 2023 and served on ISA's e-board director team during her college years. Fun fact, ISA helped Katya get her job.
All right, Sharon, you're introducing Nalin.
Okay, so this is Nalin, and he is a software engineer at Meta, and he's been working in the industry for over 5 years and is very passionate about creating innovative solutions that make a difference. And he is striving to constantly improve his skills and knowledge and is always looking for new challenges to tackle. In his free time, he enjoys reading and playing games and is always up for a game night or outdoor activity. And recently, he's also become a father to a beautiful daughter. And so all of his free time now goes to her. Congratulations.
And I will introduce Grace. Oh wait, am I introducing Grace? Oh, Ivy's introducing Grace, sorry.
So Grace, she spent almost half of her life in the US, and her journey from high school through undergraduate and graduate school to the workforce has filled her with pride. Reflecting on her experience as an international student, she views her time at USC as a pivotal moment. After all, it was where she received her very first paycheck. Today, she works as a research data analyst at a respected healthcare nonprofit, contributing her skills to health equity research projects that improve community health. Outside of work, she mentors fellow international students as they navigate their own path to career success in the US.
I think Sharon is introducing Francisco.
Okay, so Francisco is currently a product manager at Aventstay, and he was born and raised high in the Andes mountain in Bogota, Colombia. And because of his fear of seasons and love for movies, he moved to LA to attend USC's dual business and cinematic arts program. And he graduated in 2018. After graduation, he worked in several startups, including at Me Too. And he now works at Venstay, a hospitality tech company operating and distributing luxury vacation homes.
All right, and I will introduce Estrellita. So Estrellita, Essie for short, is originally from Mexico and completed her undergrad and graduate degrees in the US. Before her time at USC, she did a year of OPT where she discovered her interest in digital marketing. She went to Annenberg, and while there, she interned at Fabletics and Fullscreen to gain experience in the field. After graduation, she completed her OPT at a biotech and medtech communications agency. And now she's on H-1B working in the market team at Sarepta, a biotech company engineering solutions for rare diseases. She currently lives in Marina del Rey with her husband and their dog, a mini Aussie named Kuzco. Cute. Love dogs.
You guys can see him if you want later after.
Okay. If we get someone asking a question to see your dog, that'll be a perfect opportunity.
Yes.
All right, so let's jump into the moderated Q&A questions. Ivy and Sharon will be taking turns asking the questions that we have prepared for you. And then once we have gone through those questions, we'll open up the floor for Q&A for the audience.
Okay, so I can start it. Our first question is actually for all panelists. So our question is, how has your international identity impact your career? And we can answer this question through the follow with like the same as our introduction. So Katya, would you mind start first?
Yeah, sure. I guess like from a logistical standpoint, the international identity, it's definitely made the job process and my career in general a little bit harder. But in terms of like what I bring to the table, I feel like it definitely has given me an edge. I can provide a global perspective just through my background. And yeah, just I think also as international students, we're able to just adapt at a much faster rate than a lot of other people. So it definitely brings a lot of great soft skills to the table. But yeah.
Yeah, Nelly, you can start.
Yeah, I agree with Katya that in general, being an international student, it's much more difficult to navigate. Like I did my bachelor's from India, and then I came to US to do my master's, and it was a complete change of scenery, a complete change of ecosystem and everything that I knew. So it was there were definitely difficulties in navigating through, hey, your job search is how do you do that, and all of the other aspects of your life. But I guess there's also an edge where just being international student is what Katya said. You have a diverse set of perspectives that not everyone else would have, and that definitely gives you an edge over other candidates or other participants in general. And all of the other organizations at USC are really well established to actually help us navigate those difficulties overall. Because I think one of the major aspects of the people who actually face the challenges are the ones running those organizations now. So they really know firsthand what difficulties people usually face when they do such a such thing. So yeah, definitely. Kind of like a double-sided sword.
Thank you for sharing. Grace, you are the next.
Sure. So yeah, when I first started in the US, being an international person definitely didn't help me like settle in the US. Although some people will say, "Oh, it's so cool, you speak two languages. Oh, you speak three languages." But at the end, I was still very new to the US, and I wasn't very used to the like social and like academic situation in the US. So that took me some time to settle in. But however, it's also the international background that kind of forced me to keep my mind open, because after all, I'm in a new country with a different language, and I was able to like open up more to people with different backgrounds. And when I was networking, I also felt more comfortable reaching out to people, not just from my own country, but later also like, to people from different countries too. So I did use my international identity to help navigate the networking process in the US. So at the end, I think I turned out feeling grateful for, you know, not being born in the US because I can see everything through a fresh lens. And that gave me a lot of inspirations.
Thank you. Francisco, you are the next.
Yeah, I'd echo a lot of what the other panelists said. I think it's hard at first to try to adapt to like the different job or what it's like to be in the US job market or working in a company. As someone who worked in Colombia a couple times and then came to the US, I think it's different. Definitely like in the US, for example, people are there's very like a divided line between work and friends, and some people can be very private about their personal lives, but then at their job, it's a very different thing, right? So I think learning those and then starting to use things like the other panelists said on you know what makes you different is actually normally a pretty good asset. So if you speak a different language, it's a lot of jobs that require two languages or whatever, you'll be like miles ahead because obviously you'll be bilingual in that other language. If you come from another bigger market, whether it's Latin America, whether it's Asia, whether it's Southeast Asia, there's a lot of companies growing a lot outside the US, a lot of tech companies, a lot of others. So I think bringing those insights and being like, oh, hey, like I know the US market, but I know these other places really well, and I have an understanding of both can be a pretty good way to kind of shape your career and use it as more of an asset than a restraint or negative. You know?
Yeah, Astrolita, you can answer it.
Oh, yes. I definitely with Francisco, and obviously we speak Spanish, which is such a popular language. And, you know, I'm sure all of you have your language that, you know, it's very popular all around. But I think I've never had a job where Spanish wasn't beneficial to speak. And you'll find that whatever you bring to the table, whether your perspective or your language, it will, you know, be important at some point in your career. Also, obviously, we're all incredibly responsible and smart. Like, we go to this university and we're graduating and able to do everything. But I do believe that being an international student puts you in a position where you have to be really careful with your career, and you kind of have to get it together before your American friends. Um, and I just think that's just such a huge advantage that we're being so mindful with our career. We're forced to make fast decisions. And I do think that in the end, it pays off, even though it's incredibly difficult.
Thank you all for sharing. Definitely, we can see we encounter a lot of challenges, but at the same time, we also encounter many opportunities because of our international student identity. So, Sharon, would you mind like bring us to the next question?
Okay, so the next question is more about your job and internship search process. So this question is for Grace, Katya, and Nalin. How did you handle the sponsorship question when searching for jobs and internships at USC? And Grace, would you like to get us started?
Yes. So I think that's a question only international student will understand, and it's kind of like a sensitive question. It's also the question that I wish like employers wouldn't ask in the interview, which sometimes it happen. But all in all, yeah, sponsorship is a very big issue to international students. I'm not sure about employers, but sometimes the issues that are big to us are not necessarily big to other people. So same in this case too. I remember like when I first applied to jobs, I did feel less confident because I need sponsorship, and I have some friends who would be like, oh, if this company doesn't sponsor me, I'm not gonna just apply at all. I don't find it necessarily true because later I found that although the fee that companies pay to sponsor us might seem big to ourselves, but it's not as big compared to, let's say, the budget for their whole team, the whole department, or the company. So the sponsors might see it differently than us. And second, like I know sometimes company they do not sponsor, but I still think it's worth giving a try to apply, because if we really didn't get it, then at least we have some interview experience, which is very precious, to our job applications journey. And second, like sometimes even companies say they won't sponsor, but sometimes they will later because companies are not sure how much value you can bring to the table. So sometimes like they would put the, bad things aside and then, tell you the ugly truth, but then they might be able to sponsor. So that's another case. And then the third one, what was I gonna say? So for sponsor, yeah, so sometimes like if company ask me whether I need sponsorship or not, I knew I was on OPT, I was on CPT, but companies may not know as much yet, so I wouldn't put a big no at the front head. So for example, if a company asks me if I need sponsorship, I used to be like, oh yes, I do, and then explain why I need sponsorship, what is it like, blah, blah, blah. And then obviously they would turn down companies. And then later I learned that when company asked me if I need sponsorship, I would be like, oh no, I don't need, like for now, because I'm an OPT, I'm on CPT, or like F1 visa, I can work a bit. That will kind of calm companies down and give them time to do the research. But if you just give them a hard no, or like yes, then they would be like cut off and choose to not process to the next step. So I think it's important to be open-minded and try to understand the sponsorship issue from the company side. So that's what I learned through the process.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. That's really helpful. And moving on to Katya.
Yeah, I had a similar tactic to Grace. I feel like in the beginning, I was very like, oh, when they asked if I need sponsorship, I would just say yes. But then I quickly like switched my tactic to saying no and then just explaining it later on. Like definitely don't lie to the employers or like whatever, but for sure, like I would just wait until like they formally ask you like, are you on OPT? Like, will you need sponsorship in the future? Then you explain your situation. Um, I have been in like situations where I would make it to the last round, and that was the only time that they asked me. And then it was from then that they decided whether or not like I was worth it or not, for them to like sponsor. But yeah, I would definitely do research on the companies that you are interested in applying to, seeing if they have a history of sponsoring international students. But also, I do think that there is like this myth of like bigger companies, more established companies, being more willing to hire international students. But honestly, I think I found that even sometimes like smaller companies and startups are more willing to hire international students. They see a lot of worth in us. But yeah, definitely just look into companies and their research and be willing to take a chance the same way that Grace said. But yeah, if they know your value, they'll be willing to sponsor you.
Yeah, thank you for your insights as well. Nalin?
Yeah, I have a similar experience. It's like initially there's like this, you fear that if you say yes, you need sponsoring, you would be biased or in your application it might be rejected unfairly. But in my experience, that has not been true. Like it's been a very transparent process. And I would always recommend everyone, so if you're in doubt, just chat with the recruiter. She is always on your side. She wants you to get hired. That's how the recruiter actually gets paid in general. So don't be scared about talking in detail about the sponsorship process, explaining your visa situation to the companies. And as Katya said, there's no in my experience, I haven't seen the fact like, hey, big companies are more willing or hire more international students as compared to like smaller companies. But one thing I do wanna iterate over again is like do your research on the companies. I've seen a lot of people who actually get an internship at a company, but it turns out that they don't sponsor international students, and then they don't get a return offer, and then they're at the point where they're about to graduate, they don't have any return offers, and they're like struggling to get offers for jobs. So do your research, know about your company. Hey, if they've hired international students before, if they've done sponsorship before, and if yes, then you're okay, good to go. But just talk with their manager, just talk with the recruiter and get everything sorted out first. That's like the most important process.
Yeah, thank you all for your answers. It's really helpful to like hear about some of the tactics that you use to phrase the answer to the sponsorship question. And I'm giving it back to Ivy for the next question. Yeah, so as our panelists mentioned about how to navigate with the OPT CPT sponsorship, so now let's discuss how to utilize our university resource to do the internship search or the job search. So the question is, what university resources did you find most helpful in your job search or internship search? And how can current students make the best use of them? So this question is for Francisco, Estrelita, and Katya. Francisco, would you mind start with the question?
Yes, I can definitely start. I mean, obviously, like there's the obvious answers of like on-campus recruiting and that kind of stuff, but I think everyone probably, attending this panel has probably been to those or seen some of that. So I think my two biggest things are one, like interest groups or clubs at USC. Like USC is actually so rich, and like if there's an interest out there, there's a club at USC that exists that like will take students for that. And so it'll be like I was in the like entertainment focused group, and like the product, there's I think now a product manager focused like org, and they can be part of like different schools sometimes, but you can even join if you're in a different school. They're normally almost never restricted to the school that's sponsoring the organization. So that would be like a biggest tip. And then the other thing is signing up or joining classes that have guests, because there'll be like these amazing panelists. There'll be like big executives at companies, or there'll be a startup founder or something like that. And you just get to talk to them in the class. You get to show like who you are. You most often will get connected to them if you ask the professor or if they give out their emails. So don't just like, I mean, like if you have the credit space, like whether it's inside your major or if you can take a couple of classes outside that have like amazing speakers come by, that they don't seem that big, that you've heard good things about that. Um, there's obviously a science behind obviously approaching a panelist at a class and not being too rude about it, but I found that that's like a very easy like pipeline into meeting different executives or people that you might find interesting that could hire you, could help you get hired. So I think those would be like my two bigger hacks for using university resources to try to leverage for a job or an internship.
Thank you, Francisco. Estrelita, you can start with your answer.
So I think like obviously a really big one is the Career Development Center. I'm like blanking on the official name, but get your resume checked out, get your cover letter checked out. I feel like sometimes for us, something can be very natural, or for our parents, it can be very natural to include, but then it's like a huge no-no in the US. So like if you're looking for your first internship, definitely give all your documents like a pass and make sure like everything is, up to standards. One thing that I did, I think when I was a junior, is that I found job titles on LinkedIn that I wanted as an entry-level job. This doesn't have to be your dream job, just like entry level, what you think you will want, and find the skills that they want and then find them at USC. Like when I was a student, I remember everybody wanted to learn Photoshop. There's a class that you can learn that for free. They'll give you a certificate. I think I really wanted to learn how to code. I thought I was going to need it. I mean, I didn't, but I thought it was going to be huge. And actually, Annenberg has a fund, and they paid for me to go to Stanford to learn how to code for a weekend and then come back. So my whole trip and class was paid off. I just had to kind of like write a letter to a donor as to why USC couldn't offer me that course and why I needed to take it in another institution. And then, my advisor supported me through the letter and all of this. So like, there's so many things at USC that are like hidden resources that you don't know about. Like I told a friend that I was going to Stanford and they were like, what? How are you doing this? Annenberg's paying for it. They had like no idea it existed. So just find what you want to do and just literally Google it away. I assure you there's somebody at USC who's like willing to offer it to you or like willing to help you to get it.
Thank you so much for sharing those hidden resources. And up next is Katya.
Yeah, kind of just echoing a lot of what Essie and Francisco said, but also I feel like for every department and major, they have like their school department job boards. I know for a fact for like the School of Cinematic Arts, they had that, and that's how I got my internship. From there, like I would look at the job board, look at the company, and try and find USC alumni that work there, connect with them, and that's literally how I first got my internship at USC. But then also just attending workshops similar to this. I was in ISA previously, but my first semester of ISA, they held another professional career panel similar to this. And I just kept the contact of one of the people who was speaking at the time. And now she's actually one of my coworkers. So attending stuff like this is definitely good. Yeah, if anyone wants to network later, I'll drop my info below. But definitely taking advantage of the Trojan network. I transferred to USC my sophomore year, and I can definitely say for a fact the network here is incredible. Trojans will definitely help you out as much as you can.
Thank you so much for bringing up the networking topic, because this is our next topic. Sharon?
Yeah, so this next question is for Estrelita and Francisco. So, what are some effective ways to build a professional network while leveraging your identity as an international student? And Estrelita?
Yes. Oh, I'll go first. I think we are giving a lot of advice about connecting with alumni, which you definitely should do, and follow all the steps. And there's so many resources on it. But what I found super helpful, and it's how I got the job who ended up sponsoring me, is networking with your peers. Like when you're on campus and you go, for example, to a career track, which is how I met this person. I went there by myself. Like if there's not a friend to go with you, go by yourself, sit with someone, talk to that someone. Don't just be on your phone the entire time you're on the bus or while you're waiting. Talk to people, be friendly to people. The people around you in your classroom, they are going to be directors with you. They're going to go to the C-suite with you. Like those are your peers. And nothing feels better than having one of my older classmates tell me, "Oh, there's an opening at my company. Do you want to interview? Do you want to do this?" Like being friends with my peers and being nice and not competitive and helping them has opened so many doors for me, like legit sponsorship opportunities that trace back to me being nice to some random girl at USC. So definitely foster your current relationships. They go so far.
Yeah, thank you, Estrelita, for sharing that. Moving on to Francisco.
Yeah, I think I would follow very similar advice. I think it's sort of like trying to meet, you're keeping in touch with your peers and that to this point, like there's a lot of stuff that will pop up in other companies or you never know. So I think that's always helpful. Something I found, and like it's probably been obviously said a bunch of times before, but it's reaching out to obviously other USC people, whether you met them or whether or not. Sometimes people are open with through the USC portal or LinkedIn. If you're just like, hey, let me LinkedIn this person that I'm interested in that title to sort of this point, like, oh, like I want to go into that field. Let me ask them what their job is like. You don't have to be like, oh my God, I need an internship at your company now. Because we can obviously, like, as international students, and feel that pressure of like, oh, I need to get an internship now. I need to get like a visa sponsorship now. And we can be like a bit like too eager, too hungry. But sometimes, like, if you're earlier in your life as a student, you can just kind of start building those relationships where like, oh, I'm gonna like LinkedIn this person and be like, hey, I don't know, what is a social media manager? What is a product manager? What is a software engineer at a big tech company? What is their life like actually like? Beyond like get me a job, it's like, do you even want to do that job? Because it's so easy for like companies and positions to be like murky and they're gonna do all these things, but it's like, no, like let's talk about like what the job is really like. So I think growing that network is super important. And then beyond that, like I think Kate mentioned it earlier. Message or try to see other international students or other people who you think might be international companies, and they're always like they'll tell you like, oh yeah, this company does sponsor visas, or they won't, and this is what I did, and sort of getting that inside, like what Americans call like inside baseball of like what a company does or what they do, and sort of building those relationships forward can be a big asset. And people who are international and whatever love to meet other people from other countries and kind of using that as sort of like that asset to learn more. So that's kind of what I would say is like never, yeah, always like networking, not too eagerly, but also with good interest and sort of genuine interest in that person and what that field is like. And then you never know when you follow down the line, you're connected with that person, a job happens to pop up at that company, you see it, or maybe even better, like other panelists mentioned, they mentioned a job that's opening and they think about you. So sort of that long-term thought behind it.
Yeah, that's really helpful advice from like networking with classmates and peers to learning about different positions and discovering your own interests. So I'll hand it off to Ivy for the next question.
Thank you. So the next question is for Grace and Nelly. What is one thing you wish you had known while you were a student at USC? So we can start with Grace.
Can I circle back to networking? Because that's really one thing that I wish I knew better when I was at USC. So when I was at USC, that was a couple years ago, and to be honest, I didn't join much student organizations or, like things like alumni. Because one, I feel like shy, I wasn't motivated enough. And then sometimes I also feel too occupied by homework, assignments, research projects, and sometimes I need to apply for jobs too. And so didn't network much when I was at USC, but when I started looking for a job, I was networking people. Like I was sending people LinkedIn message like all day long. It was like crazy. It was really because, and I regretted it not starting early because once I have to type everything, and that was during the pandemic, it became kind of dry and I had to make extra connections, do extra research because when I, cold email people, cold message people, I'd have to let them know that I know a bit about them. I have some like common interests between them and me, and that took up so much time. But if I had joined more events at USC, I could just meet people and, and talk and greet. That would be so much easier. So I think that's one thing I regret not doing more in USC. It's not going to more events. Because when I like network with people on LinkedIn, like Francisco said, it's not like a one-step thing. You can't be like message people, be like, oh, nice to meet you, and blah, blah, blah. Can you tell me about the, company culture at your firm? Like for me, it's always build a step-by-step, like, greeting people, asking for a coffee chat, and then building conversations and then asking for information. And there are so many steps, but sometimes you just don't have that much time to get that, either referral or insight. So it's much better to start early, start from campus. So that's one thing I wish I knew more when I was a student.
Thank you so much. Nelly, you can go next.
Yeah, sorry about that. I was on mute. So just want to iterate on the Grace's point was like, yeah, networking. I also didn't really take networking seriously. Maybe it was because where I'm in India and no one does networking in India that way. But that's like a great way to make connections. And another thing that I didn't know or know how to do was like following up on them. Like I went to a couple of networking events, I made some connections, but then I didn't really follow up on them. So it didn't really turn into anything. So networking is important, but as part of that, you also have to like follow up, like, hey, I met you on that event, and then send them a LinkedIn connection request, or just message them about the, hey, this is where we met, and we talked about these specific things, and that's I'm interested in the following stuff. So just be sure to follow up so that networking event or that connection actually leads to something. And the other thing was like always have hope. So USC has like a ton of opportunities. You don't even know. Like same thing which Katya said in the last question. There are like a ton of hidden opportunities or hidden things that we don't even know of. So connect with your seniors. They've been through the same issues that you're going through right now. They would provide like the best knowledge, information, or like the way to resolve that. Connect with your seniors. Don't just assume that this is not possible or you won't be able to do that. There might always be a way that you just not know of. So those are the two main things I think I would wish I would know when I joined USC.
Thank you. I'll pass it to Sharon.
Okay, so the next question is about cultural adaptation, and it's for Estrelita and Katya. So what have you learned about US work culture along the way? And starting off with Estrelita.
Yes, so the US has been the only country that I worked in. So in a way, it's the only work culture that I've assimilated to. I think it's very interesting because some companies are just very reserved and they only have this like, company persona. But there's other companies in the US where they're a family and, everybody gets together and they do things after work. And your personality is such a huge part of your experience there. And obviously, we all want to pretend that being smart and dedicated and hardworking is going to get you where you want to go. But in the US, I found that also being really nice and buddy buddy with people will get you just as far. For example, I was part of this team where we had a lot of knowledge of digital marketing, but the rest of my company didn't. And I feel like there were people in my team who were more knowledgeable than I was and had way more experience, but people wanted me in their projects because I wasn't condescending, or I was, easy to work with, or whatever you may have. So again, same thing that I said with your peers at USC, like show up, be nice, help people. Having ownership is important, but also helping your coworkers is very important as well. If there's office drama, don't engage in the drama. But yeah, it's a very different culture. Like I think Americans feel sometimes very comfortable at work, creating relationships and having that type of persona.
Thank you, Astralita. Moving on to Katya.
Yeah, I'm similar in the fact that the US is also the only work culture I've worked in. And she made a great point about you should definitely like make sure you're nice to everyone. Personality hires are definitely a thing. But especially towards the tail end of interviews, like they know your experience, what you bring to the table, but they also want to be able to work with someone they actually like. So having your personality shine through during interviews is also really important. In terms of like actual work culture, I think it depends on the industry and the company culture in general. I don't think it can really be generalized. I work like at the intersection of entertainment tech, and I'm also just lucky in general that I work in a very egoless company where everyone's thoughts and opinions are very much valued, no matter what your position is, where you lie on like the food chain. And especially like in startup culture, we have a mentality of like no task is too big or too small. You really just learn to be a jack of all trades. So yeah, I wouldn't be able to like generalize the work culture across all industries, but yeah, I know it differs from like finance and entertainment and all that.
Yeah, thank you for sharing your experiences. And we have one last question, so handing it back off to Ivy. So the last question is, how long-term career development strategies have worked for you? And this question is for Nellin, Grace, and Francisco. So Nellin, you can start first.
Yeah, so I think long-term career development strategies are really important in general because they help you prioritize what you really want at that point of time. So it might be like, hey, so for example, let me give you my own example. Was I came to do my master's, and at that point, my aim was to actually get a good job in software engineering. I did my master's in computer science, and the long-term development strategy that I did was basically look up the jobs that I wanted in like after 5 years of my life, figure out what skills were required for those jobs, and start learning those skills from right now. Because even if they're not helpful right now, they would be helpful once you get to an entry-level job, or once you are giving your interviews, or once you're doing the job that will get you to where you want to be 5 years later. So definitely think about what you want to do long term, what you want to do after 5 years. Start looking at what skills you need for that and start working towards building those skills. It might be doing an internship to get that, it might be doing your own project, or it might be just learning something or taking a course for that. But definitely have that long-term career development strategy, prioritize what your goals should be, and then work towards those goals. But yeah, it has definitely worked out for me, figuring out which skills to learn and then slowly developing those step by step. Yeah.
Thank you, Nellin. Grace, you're next.
Yeah, so I agree with what Nalin says, like picture out what you want to be in 5 years or like just when you graduate. And it doesn't have to be a very clear picture. You can, maybe just know which industry you want to be at or which title you'll be, taking but like at least have some pictures because that's related to what you are doing like right now. Like even if you are just a freshman, and even if you'll have to wait 2 more years until you graduate, I think it's good to start early and connect what you're doing right now to your long-term goal, because things don't happen overnight. Like take job application as an example. Like we can, like for example, if we are applying for jobs at the end of the school year, right, at the 4th year, but we can't just start like writing up resumes or like cover letters like at the 2nd semester of 3rd year or whatever. Just taking that as example, because there's so much work that goes into the resume, like, you know, professional terms, you know, some techniques, etiquettes, some fonts, so much that goes into a resume that a lot of the steps they are taking longer time than we want them to be. So we have to encounter those. And other things are very similar to, you know, applying for a job or fixing resumes too. We have to start early. So when I was in school, I actually started applying for a job before I started school, because my background was not in data analytics, but I knew that I want to be an analyst. So to fill in the gap, I have to, like, you know, participate in different competitions, team up with schoolmates, with professors to make sure I got good grades. Those are the things I could start preparing before school started, and that's what I did. And I also started, like, you know, browsing on LinkedIn on the JDs. And I think like 1 semester in, I started applying for internships, and I actually got an offer from the advertising company. So yeah, starting early and knowing the gap, I think that helped me got my first internship offer. And that was, you know, when I was a year and a half away from graduating. So yeah, I think that's what I would say to students, to start early.
Thank you. Francisco, you can start.
Yeah, I'll kind of like echo slash combine with Nalin and Grace said, and not to sound too crazy, but it's sort of like always be sort of thinking of like how you're building your resume. Is sort of the idea, like whether you're, like Grace was saying, like you're targeting this internship that will obviously be on your resume, but once you're on the job, it's very important to understand where you want to go or things that you think are valuable. So like whenever you're an intern or when you're starting a job or any job, still always like a little bit of choice into like what kind of projects or tasks you can do. Sometimes they're very strict about like, you know, your boss is assigning you, but there is some kind of flexibility on that. So I think knowing what you want to learn or where you're going, and sort of like asking for those projects or being like, hey, I'm interested in this. Like, does this team do any, like, I'll use an example, data analytics, or you know, or we're building in product management, we're building a mobile app, and I someone wants to have experience knowing, you know, what it's like to build and ship a mobile app, and are they able to like talk, even if you are not on that team, can you maybe reach out to the people doing it and see if they can get you involved or learn something from that. So I think, like, again, not to sound like too psychopathic, but sort of like always be building your not sociopathic, just building your resume or having an idea of that, and then once you're on the job, having an idea of like your accolades or the things you're working on, so that you can kind of keep writing your resume as you go, or at least ideas for it later down the line. You can perfect the language and all that, but sometimes you'll finish and like it'll be like an internship 2 years ago, and you're like, oh, what was that project, and you don't remember anymore, and you probably don't have like any of those metrics because you're not at that company anymore. So I would say that it's sort of like always kind of like be thinking actively of like how you're progressing your career and sort of like materializing that in a resume. And I'll recommend this one book that I really like for everyone to take a look. It's called Barking Up the Wrong Tree. I think it's called Why Everything You Think About Success Is Mostly Wrong, by this author Eric Barker, and he talks a lot about like that and the U.S. culture, and what we talked a lot about today, where like being nice and like your boss liking you, like people are like, oh, that's so old school, and like you're kissing up, but it's like actually like the statistics are there, like people get promoted. So there's a lot of really good stuff in there where it's like being, I think, as you're mentioning that, Sarita, like be nice to your coworkers, like they're gonna help you out, like all those things. Like there's a lot of like good data behind it, and they also like debunked and disprove a lot of like, you know, myths about working in the especially the U.S. workplace. So I definitely recommend that book.
Can I add something?
Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
Yes, I also wanted to add another story about starting early. But thank you, Francisco, for sharing the book. I just looked it up on Amazon as well. So
Yeah,
the story I was gonna share is about starting early as well. So for example, when I didn't come from a healthcare background. I was a social worker, I was a gerontologist, I was a sociologist, but I was never someone who actually worked in the field. I was not a doctor. But I did knew that I wanted to work in the healthcare industry. That was before I started school. So once I had that picture of me working in healthcare industry, I volunteered so much in school to be like a team lead in group projects, or I would reach out to professors to work on their healthcare related project too. And also when I get to be the team lead, I get to decide, the theme of our group project, because a lot of the times for school projects, professors just want us to, practice on the skills, right? It doesn't matter which theme we are taking. But once I play this team lead role, I get to decide, oh, we are going the healthcare route. So at the end, I end up have so many healthcare projects on my resume, and I was able to convince people that I have enough experience in the healthcare industry. So the point about realizing early is just that you can use the time you have left to fill up your resume, to refresh your image to your future employers. So that's what I wanted to share. Start early.
Thank you, Grace. Thank you for sharing your own experience. And I will pass it back to Eddie. It's our Q&A session now.
Yes, thank you, Ivy. And thank you all the panelists for answering those questions. I see that we have a very engaged audience and a lot of questions in the Q&A already. So actually, I want to give Lucas and Anush a chance to ask the Q&A questions so they can also introduce themselves as ISA leaders.
Right, perfect. Yeah, I'm Lucas. I'm one of the co-executive directors of ISA.
And I'm Anush. I'm also the co-chair of professional affairs along with Sharon, ISA.
Yeah, did you want to pick the first question that we asked from the Q&A?
Sure. The first question is, how does graduating at the end of the fall semester during December affect job opportunities, since the person graduating will have to do another semester after summer internships? Like, is it difficult to get a return offer in that sense?
Can I answer that?
Of course.
So I graduated in December, and in my experience, no, it doesn't really affect your return offer. You can basically decide or choose a date to when you return. So I graduated in December. I took a month off to backtrack, and then I joined my official job in February. So no, it doesn't really change the chances of you getting a return offer. It's purely based on your performance.
Yeah, I would add to what Nalin was saying. I think it actually might even be more positive because there might not be as many applicants sometimes.
Yeah.
It's like summer open jobs. But if you're thinking of like, oh, what about my OPT? What about this or that? Like if you get a job offer that maybe does actually start in July and you're graduating in December, you can always pick up whether it's a volunteering position or something that, qualifies for your OPT or whatnot. So you don't have any of those kind of problems. And honestly, you can kind of just relax for 6 months and then start the other jobs. That sounds pretty nice. Yeah.
Okay, so the next question we have in the chat is some companies will ask you to check the box asking whether you need sponsorship in the future or in the application process. Would you check that box? Because I know we talked a little bit before about how maybe kind of putting that off. So if someone would like to answer that on their opinion on whether they would check that box in the application stage.
I can take this question if you guys don't mind. I would say that this is so personal to each and every one of you. I had a STEM OPT. Some of you will have it too. And I felt very comfortable saying no because I can always be like, I have a 3-year work permit. We don't have to do that. But be prepared for some rejection. Like I had interviews where I showed up and on the interview, they asked me if I needed sponsorship and I explained my situation. And then they kicked me off the interview. Or I had offers resign because I didn't check the box. And then when we got all the way there, they were like, oh, no, we cannot do this. So there will be some heartbreak there if you play the game. But I also have friends who are from countries where they're very unstable and they like, need a solid offer. They absolutely cannot go back home. So for them, they'll always click yes. Or when I was switching companies, I always click yes because my current company had me on H1B. Like I was not going to leave a company to just be, hanging in the uncertainty. So I will say it's very personal, but each of you will have like a different like risk assessment. I would say for internships, I never clicked it because I just really wanted to like go in and get experience and meet people, even if they didn't end up hiring me. But again, extremely personal, which you decide to do.
Yeah, I was gonna say it depends on my mood too, for the same reasons that Essie has.
Yeah, that's absolutely fair, honestly. But I'd like to open up to the room as well, people in person. If you have any questions, feel free to raise hand. We'll be alternating between the questions online and in the room. So anyone have a question?
Lucas, can we see the room? Can we say hi? Hi.
Not showing it.
Oh, no worry.
It's a little, yeah, there you go. Thank you.
All right then, so there's no questions as of now in the room, so we're gonna go back to the chat. There's quite a long list. So someone's asking, what was the, oh, sorry, where's it gone? What should I do if I don't get a return offer from an internship? So if someone would like to take that one, I know it's kind of broad, but
I can talk a little bit about that, but I know I've talked a lot. I actually didn't get I wasn't planning on doing a return offer for any of the internships I got. And I think it can be stressful. I think, to Nolan's point earlier, if you happen to work in an industry where that's common, it tends to be, consulting, tech, banking are kind of the bigger ones. But not to say that like startups don't do return offers either. They're just not that official. It's just kind of like, hey, will you just kind of stay on? And you're like, sure. Like that's kind of how that goes with smaller companies. Um, but if you know early on, like it's October and you graduate in May and you don't have a return offer, well, you have your plan kind of set. If it's most companies will tell you pretty early on, but if not, I think you should definitely press them or have a very clear timeline of when they'll tell you because you do need time to find a job. We touched about this earlier. Like it is hard and to quote Strategitas, I think kind of heartbreaking sometimes when you are interviewing for jobs because you're like, this is it, this is the company, and then they give you the offer, and then you're like, oh, but even for me, like I just needed a transfer. I had an H1B one, which is actually specific to Chile and Singapore. And even then where it was like, oh, I just need to transfer it. Sometimes they'll be like employers just freak out. And they're like, no, like we can't. And so I think you have to be like a little bit of like thick skin and be ready for a little bit of that. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know if that answers that.
Can I also add something? So I know that not getting a return offer feels harsh, it feels rejected. But if the team don't want us, maybe the chemistry didn't work and we don't want them to. It's no big deal because there are so many other companies in the pool that we can apply to. And also, even if they don't give us a return offer, they didn't take everything away from us because we still got the work experience at the team. We got the network, the colleague that we work with, every day. We got the vibe of working in the team. And I felt that helps a lot in interview, like showing people you're ready to work with teams. So like return offer is a big thing, but there's also so many stuff that we're already getting from the internship that we need to amplify in our resume to maximize the time and experience we have from the internship. I think that would be my focus if I got a rejection of return offer.
Yeah, can I also add something? One of the things that I've seen a lot of people do is when they find out, hey, you're not getting an intern offer, they stop putting in all effort in their internship. And that's also leave a very bad lasting impression on their team, on their manager, and everyone around them. So I would recommend everyone not to do that because you might not be working with them now, but they are part of your network and they might be useful to you in the future for getting you more leads or if you want to come back to the same company in case you like working there. So even if you don't get a a return offer from that specific internship, please don't just stop doing work or don't giving any single thought about everyone around you. And please still be respectful of everyone who you've worked with, your manager, your peers, your team. That's really important also.
And also, sorry, it's me again. Sometimes not giving out return offer is not necessarily your fault. It could be the company's budget or their strategic plan for the year change. So like a lot of the times it's not about the intern, it's about the company. And it's, things out of our hands. So
Yeah, definitely. Thank you guys for sharing. We have a few more questions still in the chat. So can someone talk about the H-1B lottery system in more depth and how they dealt with the uncertainty surrounding that?
So I know that for a lot of corporate companies, you have the lottery, right? I think you start preparing or like start talking to companies in October, prepare for the lottery, got a decision in April, and then you start working in October. For nonprofit that has the affiliation with research organizations, you don't have to do the lottery at all. You can apply anytime. You can file for premium processing. You can hear back from the USCIS in like 2 weeks, I think. So that's pretty fast and you can apply anytime. It's very convenient. So I think nonprofit is a good option.
I would also
when-
like to, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was saying, so I came on F1 visa. I've applied for H1B, I think 4 more times. I still haven't gotten selected in the entire lottery. And it is definitely like it brings up a lot of questions like, hey, what I'm gonna do next if I don't get selected in the lottery? What's my future? Do I have to move back to the country I come from? And I would just like to iterate is for a lot of companies, there are steps that they take as contingencies in case the employee doesn't get selected into H1B. So one of the best options for you is to talk to your HR in the company or talk to your manager, explain them the situation, and figure out what the next steps for you could be that the company can support you. Because if you're working for a company, there's a very high chance that the company would do extra steps to keep you there, to retain you there, because it's just not useful for them to hire someone and then train them to do the same job that you're doing right now. So it's not as difficult as you think. They would go the extra mile for you if there is a way to help you out. So definitely do talk to your team, do talk to your HR manager, and then figure things out what the next steps are for you.
Yeah, I think we talked about it a bit earlier in the panel, and I forget where my other panelists mentioned it, is you have to be your own advocate. So you really need to understand the process of doing an H-1B. You can't show up to an internship or, sometimes like big corporations, they have like corporate counsel that already has done a bajillion H-1Bs and whatever, and they already know the process. My experience was the complete opposite. It's like a startup that like barely has an HR department. And then you come up and you're like, hey, like I have this huge problem. Can you help me figure it out? So you normally, like, I would recommend, like what I did is I had already done some consultations with like immigration lawyers. They often do a free consultation, by the way, almost all of them. And I know Addie's had a bunch of them join panels for USC and whatnot. That's how I met my immigration lawyer. And so I just knew the process like really well. I actually have an H1B1, which means that I didn't have to do the lottery, but that's something I found out because of an immigration lawyer. So I was like, oh my God, I'm happen to have a co-passport with Chile. I don't have to do a visa lottery. It's way less expensive, all that. Maybe you're from Mexico or Canada. You can do a trade visa. There's all kinds of stuff that you can learn how to do. But again, you really need to know how to solve the problem if they're not like a big company that already has done that, because you're essentially coming up with like a huge problem that they don't really want to deal with. So if you know sort of like the timelines and you're able to kind of like talk things through and kind of convince them that it's actually not as hard as it's been sold, it often can work out. And obviously, maximize your OPT as much as you can. If you're not STEM, try to get it, because that definitely helps a lot.
Yeah, thank you guys so much for sharing. And on the note of the OTP, we actually, for our people joined on the call still, we're having another event on this Wednesday where we will have an immigration lawyer actually come to speak about the OTP process. So if you want to follow up on that now that you know a little bit more about that, we have that coming up. But circling back to the questions, we have some more in the chat. So we have, if you already have an offer, do you recommend to keep applying for new positions to reduce the risk that this offer might be withdrawn in the future, before you're been onboarded? If someone would like to answer that.
I mean, I think that's a good mindset to keep applying for a job. There's nothing wrong about it. If you have time, if you have the energy, I think I would recommend doing this.
Yeah, I would also like to. I did the same thing. Besides, getting a new offer might give you in a better position to negotiate your salary for the current job or whatever job you're interested in. So yeah, definitely a good option. And I don't see any risks on just applying to another job.
And now we have as well, if you were unable to get an internship, how can you make sure to stand out with your resume? So maybe if any of you guys have any particular tips and tricks or things that maybe you felt help make your resume stand out, because we already know like being international is hard enough, but how can you make sure that your resume, especially in those kind of first filter out in application stages, how can you stand out?
So I was in STEM, so I can only speak from a STEM perspective. So even if there was no internship experience, class projects are projects, research projects are also projects. So I think the point is to just make sure to fill up resume with like professional, useful projects with like certain keywords that stands out to the HRs. So yeah, I think I would focus back on school homework assignments and
Yeah, I'd
research
say
projects. Yeah.
Yeah, same thing. Not sure about like the other streams, but for like computer science specifically, there are a ton of open source projects that you can contribute to. You don't really need to get selected. You don't need to go through any interview process. You can just start contributing towards it, and then it basically shows up as a part of your portfolio. So you can like what I think Francisco said at one point, keep on building your resume. It doesn't have to be an internship. It could be a part-time job that you're doing at your university that sort of relates to what you're trying to do. It could be a teaching assistant, a TA position at your college from the courses that you're interested in. It could be you being um, to any part-time job, or you're just contributing to any open source projects, or you're basically helping or volunteering to some of the other things, like other parts of the same thing. So don't be completely sad about like not getting an internship. That's not the only way to actually buff up your resume. There are tons of ways besides that to actually improve and stand out in your resume.
Yeah, and also I used to volunteer at a healthcare nonprofit. The title is data analyst. So when I put in the resume, I wouldn't say I'm a volunteer, I say I'm a data analyst. So I think sometimes wordings is the trick too.
And honestly, like if you're involved on campus in different clubs, have different leadership positions, you should definitely like take advantage of that point and beef it up. One advice I got from one of my like mentors was to give yourself more credit than you usually would, because you probably do a lot more than you think. Yeah.
To expand a little bit on that also, I think people can be like really stuck on getting a really like big name internship in the US, and it's like if it's that or nothing. Honestly, your first years in school, like you might not get those. And so what I would recommend is like I bet you like a lot of those large companies exist in your country back home. And so like trying to get internships that like are applicable to your career back home, where you already have a network where you can live in your parents' house, etc., or family's house, is really good. And then if you happen to be able to get like a larger corporation that maybe they have a local office there, and you can brag that you worked at that company locally, that can be really helpful. Or otherwise, to Grace's point, like if those skills or those titles are good, and again, those internships are like way more like moldable. I mean, as far as I found outside the US, like you can kind of just like make up your own title sometimes. Like they just want to help and like have you be an intern. So don't have it be like end all be all. I have to get a big corporation in the US to be my internship.
And we have another question. So what skills or special traits do you often highlight as an international student during an interview? So maybe if someone would like to also share an example, if they can remember anything recent.
I can take this one. This is how I usually bring up that I'm an international student, because like a lot of people who are American citizens like look like me or have like a Hispanic last name, and maybe they don't know that I'm not an international student. But I kind of make it my fun fact. Like my fun fact or something like that makes me stand out is always like, oh, I speak 3 languages, or I've studied in 3 countries. And that's kind of how I open it up to be like, oh yes, by the way, I'm from Mexico and I need a visa and whatever. And I feel like it's nice because you're opening up the subject in a positive manner. It's not like, thank you. Okay, by the way, I have a request. No, it's like, I bring this to the table. This is my fun fact. Look how cool it is. And be like, oh, by the way, I need sponsorship. Or by the way, now everybody knows that I'm not a US citizen. So I guess in a way, it's kind of how you present it.
Okay, and our next question is, where is it? Sorry. Sorry, I'm having a hard time. Is there any advice for master students in particular? So we have a few master students on the Zoom call right now who would love to get advice on that recruitment process.
I think one of the things is for master students, it's definitely it's more difficult to actually get an internship. It's more difficult in the time that they just have 2 years, and our session starts in August, and that's exactly when the internship applications also start. So there isn't a lot of time to sort of get accustomed to your changes, get accustomed to your curriculum, and then start applying, like start reading up. So one of the things advices is be completely prepared as you come for your masters, because you might have to start applying for internship applications as soon as you come, because August is when most of the companies open up their applications. And like as the famous saying is, an internship is the easiest way to get a job in a company that in your dream company, basically. So it's just like a little bit more difficult, because if you're doing a bachelor's, like you have 4 years to do all of that. And for masters, you're just trying to compensate for like lack of time throughout. That was my experience.
Thank you so much for sharing. And we have a question from the floor actually, which is, how useful have you guys found non-American like job experiences as like something on your resume to then go into applying to like a US job?
I mentioned it a bit earlier. I think if you can find a way that the company's international, that's helpful. If it's a local company, I think making sure that you translate what your position or your department was like, and sort of describe well what you were doing or what the company does, because you're not going to have that like, oh, I know this company, or I know. So sort of like, oh, I worked in this like random startup or this random investment firm. Like, what did you actually do there? What kind of targets do they have? What does the company do? And if you reflect that, there's not that much of a difference from working in a small company in the US. I think the fear sometimes with employers with international students is that you can maybe not know as well the like how does it like to be like in the US, like in a US like job company or like an actual job. So I think kind of like making sure you're able to kind of like quote unquote translate that into what it would be like in the US, and what that company did is pretty valuable.
Someone has a question about going back to like applying internships and not selecting that you need sponsorship. They're concerned about whether they can get in any kind of trouble for lying about that if they need it in the future, and they think it's like risky to have that. Like I think someone mentioned kind of weighing like your own risk aversion a little bit, but that risk of getting denied the offer after if you decide to omit that in the application process that you need a visa or you need sponsorship in the future?
I mean, when we say no, it's not like a hard no. We are just no for now. But they didn't say, do you need sponsorship now or in the future or in 5 years, in 10 years? The question itself is vague. So I was not okay saying no, but also I would be super prepared to explain why I think it's a no for this question and to, offer solutions for the companies too. Like sometimes if company can't sponsor, there's another way to go. You can like studying another programming school and use F1 visa to work. But that's another story. But yeah, just you need to align your answers with no and yes. It's not just a simple yes or no question, it's more about the reasoning behind them. So as long as you can link it back to no, then I guess it's fine. And also companies do background checks too. It's no joke. So I think that's the biggest gate for keeping liars or whatever.
Well, if they run the background check, like you'll have CPT to do this internship. So you will be authorized to work, like no issue. Like it's like USCIS is not going to storm in your interview and like take you away because you lie. Like it'll be fine. And I think I had a bunch of internships like in my undergraduate and graduate programs. And I think only once it came up that they were like, oh, you're an international student. We can't do that because we want to hire from this intern class and we are not sponsoring like whatsoever. We have no money. And I was like, all right, bye. But everyone else is like, yeah, I don't need sponsorship right now. Here's my CPT. I was cleared to work and they like had me in an office by the summer. Like it was, I don't know if that makes you feel better that it just truly like never came up for an internship, just a few times.
Especially for internships, to Sarita's point, like it's sort of like your free pass.
Yeah.
You like there, no one cares really in your internship, so like you can work at any company, and that won't really be a problem. So I would recommend if you can do a lot of internships. That's what I did. But to your earlier point of other panels, like let's say like for like people who like are in entertainment, like that's something that I was looking at when I was in undergrad. Like I was like, oh, Universal Pictures and like Disney, they don't really sponsor visas. So like, yeah, maybe you can go do an internship there, but like you have to be very aware that like there's just not going to be able to work there. And again, to Grace's point, like if you're on OPT and you have 3 years, like I don't know a lot of people that stay around for 3 years in one job. So like it's not really lying if you're not telling them like, hey, like you're not gonna really need to pay anything. You're already like, verified and everything. So there is, I think, a little bit of nerves in doing that, and there's a little bit of that. But having your answers very clear is a good way to handle it.
If I might add, because I think also the language of different applications can be different. Some will say, are you currently authorized to work? If you have CPT and OPT, you can say yes. And some will say, will you now or in the future require visa sponsorship? If you say no to that, be prepared that that employer might hold you to it. So they may say, yeah, you can intern with us, but we will not sponsor you. If you want to keep working for us, you have to find your own way. And I have heard that. Or I've also heard cases where students have said no, and then they tried to get a full-time job with the company, and then the company was mad that they lied about it and, rescinded the offer. So, it is there, like Estrella was saying, there's a risk involved. You might lose an offer either way. It just depends on how far into the job search process, into the application process you go sometimes.
Thank you guys for sharing and thank you for adding on, Addie. Another question is, when should we start applying for internships and what month do companies in the US usually start recruiting? I know this will differ, so if anyone from like a specific industry has any insights they would like to share.
I can go about like the computer science industry overall. So internships usually start in late August, and that's when companies start posting their openings and roles, and then it goes on till like October, end of October, and then there's like a small bucket that opens up in like mid Jan or late Jan from like if there were cancellations, if people didn't select them or things like that. So that's usually the timeline for, at least for the software engineering or computer science companies. And startups have their own. So startups don't include, they have their own process and their own timeline. So startups basically hire whenever they need people. So I don't think they have a specific process or specific timeline. Like, hey, that's when we open up roles. So yeah.
Yeah, that Alan's point, like, and kind of like the startup line or whatever, that there's, I don't know where I read this, but there's this whole stat where like 60 to 70% of jobs like are never posted. Same goes with like internships. It's like you can just like message companies and be like, hey, do you have internships, or like, are you hiring for some? And sometimes they'll be like, oh, we don't have an official program, but like, yeah, we'll pay you, I don't know, $16 an hour and you can be an intern or whatever it is now. And so I do think there's that. But if you're trying to apply to like big tech, big finance or consulting, it does tend to be like earlier in the fall, which you have to be kind of pretty aware of those deadlines. But anything else is kind of like ongoing, I would say.
Yeah. And for me, I didn't really pay attention to what month do companies start recruiting, because I'm always ready to go. Like, even if, I might not start work right now, but I'm willing to go through the interview process and see what the next step is. And so, yeah, I think I would say start applying just now, because it's not easy to get an offer. It's not like you apply and get. Sometimes a lot of companies don't even get back to us, given the job market situation right now. And it takes time to get used to not hearing back from HR, because you can be applying for 10 companies and none of them getting back to you. And it's not, it's not easy. So give yourselves time to getting used to being rejected as well. And that would start from applying for jobs, applying for internships now. So yeah, I wouldn't say, I would kind of recommend waiting.
All right. Just really quickly, are there any questions from the floor? Okay. And in that sense, do you want to ask
Yeah,
Lance?
so we have just one final question, which is someone's asking if it would be possible to get the email of the hosts, so like the panelists here. If you guys are comfortable, if you would mind sharing your email just in the general chat for people to see. But if you're not comfortable with that, that's also completely okay. And take your time with that. Take your time with that. But in that said, we'd like to thank you guys for answering all your questions here. And I think maybe Addie wants to say some final words to close up.
Yep, I just wanted to say thank you to all of you for being so generous with your time today and sharing your experiences and your insights. I, you know, think I speak for everyone who attended that it was really valuable, and I really appreciate it. We all really appreciate your time, and thanks to ISA for collaborating on this, and Ivy and Vera, who's our other grad intern, was helping with check-ins. So I appreciate all of you and look forward to future collaborations and seeing your careers continue to grow.